There's a day-to-day role that out of home plays. And a lot of that for me in my career was about scale. It was about equity and awareness, right? It's a massive awareness and salience driver, especially across the African continent, if you do it the right way. So if you're putting like a thesis on a piece of out of home, you're not going to tick any of these boxes. No one's going to remember it. It's just going to be wallpaper, right? But if you do it the right way, it is very much a salience / awareness driver. That's one part of out of home. But the other part that people don't realize is that it's a massive driver of trust in developing markets. So if consumers don't see you on their commuter routes and like on billboards like this, the trust and the belief in the brand drops significantly. I didn't know this until I did some research.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Welcome back to the Beyond the Billboard podcast. And if you've been enjoying our content and the conversations we hold with our guests and the insights that we unlock, we'd please like to ask if you can support us by subscribing to the podcast if you haven't already. Today is our first client point of view episode of 2026. At the end of 2025, on our Beyond the Billboard LinkedIn page, to our community, we submitted a poll where we asked you to vote for your favorite episodes that you would like more of in the year ahead. And client point of view episodes scored the highest. So I'm just letting you know that we heard you and we are delivering. Today, getting into this episode, we are thrilled to say that we have Silke Bucker, who's the Culture Marketing Director at Red Bull in the US, who will be joining us today. Silke brings an exceptional depth of experience, having held senior leadership roles at brands and clients such as Coca-Cola Africa, SAB Miller, or AB InBev, amongst others. Silke is a culture-first, fearless marketing leader, having 17 years of having fun and attempting the impossible across four multinationals, 200 countries, and 7 continents. Silke believes that brands have a responsibility to shape culture, and that can only happen when marketers are courageous, agile, and open to diverse thinking. Just to mention some campaigns that Silke has been involved in or led that you might be familiar with. Color Black Label Cup, Castle Light Unlocks, and the launch of Coca-Cola Water. Silke, we are privileged to have such a highly respected and experienced marketing leader join us today. Thank you for being with us.
It's great to be here. And that's quite an introduction. Thank you for the time, guys. It's nice to be here.
Really, really, truly are privileged, and we cannot wait to have the conversation with you all about your perspective on such an exciting and powerful medium. And to kick us into this episode, I'd like to ask, given your wealth of experience, not just in South Africa or across the continent, but across the globe, we would like to ask, what is your all-time favorite out-of-home campaign that you've been involved in or you've executed, and why? And what does it take to really execute out-of-home strategically at that level?
I mean, let me just start by saying that I am a huge fan of the out-of-home space. I believe that if it's brought into creative thinking and the core creative idea, it's really impactful. And that's probably the second part of your question, right? It's like, what do I think strategically needs to happen for out-of-home to be as impactful as it can be? And that would be my point of view. I've seen across the different campaigns that I've worked on, when out of home as a medium is brought into the creative thinking and from the beginning part of the creative conceptualization of whatever the brand wants to do, that's when it works at its best. I'm going to talk about 3 examples because I can't help myself, 2 of which I worked on directly and 1 that a very good friend of mine led, but I was in the company at the time. And you'll see that in all 3 of these examples, the execution of out of home was very much integral to the creative idea. And that's why I believe it was so impactful. The first one that I'll touch on was called Castle Cold Tracker. We actually won a gold can for this, an out of home media gold can, which I'm really proud of, and I'm super proud of the team as well. This was led by Promise as an agency, and the creative director at the time, his name was Nick Kousteros. He's amazing. And the idea or the challenge that we faced was that when you go into other markets in Africa, they don't believe in serving their beer cold. So there's lots of challenges like power and the cost of keeping fridges switched on, but also people actually ask for warm beer. So when you think about Castle Light, it's all about extra cold refreshment, right? So if you're not delivering on the brand promise, it's very hard to talk about the brand authentically in these markets. So what we did is we created technology that we put in fridges across Tanzania that had a direct live link to programmatic out of home, so like digital out of home billboards that told people in Dar es Salaam where the coldest beer was being served. So what we did is we offered outlet owners free media for their restaurants and their bars in return for them keeping their fridges switched on so that the beer would be served extra cold. So we also know factually there's a lot of data that if an outlet serves cold beer, the sales double, right? So that is just, it's data that we had at the time. So we did that, we rolled it out, and the brand grew significantly in that across that outlet base. So I'm really proud of that. I feel like there was a brand problem that needed to be solved. We did that in a
Yes.
creative way to bring the outlet owners on board, and the out of home medium. Obviously, we also had some digital executions, but the scale of out of home and the impact that had in the
Yes.
market was something that that traveled.
What I loved is that I've seen this campaign before, just the write up and the campaign summary and a slight little case study on it. And what I loved about it was that it played a dual role, right? So one, it was marketing the brand, all right, and then the second role was that it was supporting the shops or the spazas or the taverns by also showcasing those that had the coldest beer, right? And it did that dual job. So it's supporting, it's almost the social impact piece, which out of home is so beautifully great at doing. And then the other piece, which was obviously marketing the awareness of the brand and what Castle Light's doing and was doing in the market. And then, yes, solving a problem, which is phenomenal. And a lot of brands or marketers out there or clients or agencies, just put out of home as like this, it's this brand equity builder and that's what it's going to do. But this is such an incredible example of how it can solve a business problem. So it also layered in new technology or the new ways of using digital out of home or out of home in rest of Africa. So a really, really powerful campaign. And no wonder it was award winning. Really,
That's the
really
one.
was. Okay,
That's the
next. I've got it. If that's for the one you're starting with, I'm like, okay, it's like drum roll for
no,
what's
that's
the next one that you're
no,
going to mention?
that is a brilliant example. If we all get to work on little gold nuggets in our careers, and I think that was one for me. The second one I'll touch on is when we launched Coca-Cola Woza across Africa. So South Africa led the global launch for this. I was really, really passionate about this project. It's the first time that the Coca-Cola company reformulated the Coke brand to capture the essence of a continent, right? And I'm African. I'm very proud of my heritage and where I'm from. So I was very involved in the crafting of the story and the creative here, and it was all African led. So from the design and the illustration all the way to the ingredients. And the team that led the project was all a local team, and I'm really proud of that work. When we thought about how to launch this, it's super easy to do like a PR launch or get some influencers and tell people about the product and then hope that it travels. We didn't want to do that. We wanted to like launch with a bang and do something that no one has done before, just true to the, I guess, the creative ambition of what Coca-Cola Creations was, the platform that we launched this off of. So what we did is we dropped an LED cube the size of a small house outside of Sandton City. And it was just yellow and purple, the colors that we used. And we just kind of teased that, something is coming. And then that in itself is a piece of out of home, right? Like it stood there for 2 weeks and people were like, what's going on? What's happening here? But what we did is we also bought all the out of home space, the digital out of home space across most of Joburg, but in the Sandton CBD part. And we had the exact same messaging running concurrently on these boards. So people were driving to the office for 3 days and it just said, something is coming or coming soon or like whatever the teasing message was at the time in the colors. And then this cube was standing outside of Sandton. And then we obviously mobilized a huge influencer base to talk about what is this cube. So like to get some excitement going around what is this thing that's kind of just outside of Sandton. We had this cube standing there and people didn't know what was going on. And then we had a live reveal. Actually, it was a countdown clock. That's what it was. It was a countdown clock that counted down to the specific time that we wanted to reveal Coca-Cola Woza. No one knew what it was. We also went onto radio and people were like, guys, have you seen this? Have you seen this? So we created a lot of unbranded conversation about this, this cube that was just kind of standing in the middle of Joburg. On the reveal day, it was 12 o'clock. I'll never forget this. Everything flipped at the same time. So we had all of these creators and influencers there. The cube opened up, the can came out. It was beautiful, right? It was a beautiful moment.
Wow.
This massive life-size can, because the can itself was a piece of art. It was designed and illustrated by Joy Richu, who's a Kenyan illustrator. She's incredible. So the can itself was really spectacular and impactful. And the moment that flipped over, all the out-of-home, digital out-of-home that we had that had the countdown clock played the Woza animatic, right? And that's kind of what then carried through for the next couple of days. And this can was turning and standing outside of Sandton, piece of out-of-home art, basically. Right? It wasn't just the South African launch, but it was all out-of-home led, from the stunt all the way to like flipping it over, the countdown clock, and then revealing.
Very cool.
All very out-of-home led. So again, integral to the creative thinking, right? Like, how do we use out-of-home to give you the scale and the credibility and the talkability, but do it in a different way?
I think we're not seeing a lot, or I haven't been seeing a lot of these teaser-based campaigns that move into launch and out of home. At one point, it was quite prominent, and a lot of people were doing it or proposing it or putting it forward, but actually activating them. I haven't seen a lot of them over the last year or so, and I love those type of campaigns, really using out of home to tease leading up and then to launch it big, because out of home is fantastic for launching
Yeah.
any campaigns, right, from a strategic and
Yeah.
impact point of view. But I haven't seen a lot of those teasers into launch, and maybe Liv, you can correct me if you've got any that come to mind right off the bat.
What's just coming up for me is that I love it when a brand has got almost like the guts to put up an out-of-home campaign, invest in the campaign or a media campaign with no logo, no branding, right? So that's what I love about the teaser, is that it's creating this intrigue, but the brand has taken a leap on, usually the creative conversation is around make the logo bigger. We've had a lot of conversations with creatives on the podcast around that, but I love it like when the brand's got the courage to say, we know this is going to work, that we actually willing to pay to have messaging up to create this intrigue that actually is not branded at all. It reminds me of a lot of the creative we were seeing last year where you could only see partial logos. I also thought that was quite clever. We saw that happening with Heineken and Kellogg's in various markets across the globe. And it was the same, like I said, the guts to say, okay, we know that you're going to recognize us in some way. So we're
Right.
going to give you a clue, but we're not going to give you the whole thing. So I love that. The teaser campaign's fantastic. What I also love while you're speaking is that both the Castle example and the Coca-Cola example you've given now could not have been executed in the way they were without out of home, which I think just speaks to the power of the medium. So I love how this episode is kicked off with just these really big campaigns that are really so inspirational and give you a lot of thought starters around what can actually be done with the channel when you focus, okay, we're using out of home as the hero. This is
Yeah.
where we're going to take it.
Yes.
Yeah.
How do you build around it, right, to make sure that the message travels? Because I think that's one of the challenges, that it's a piece that's static in a certain place, but it can travel if it's used the right way. And then the last one, just quickly, is a very good friend of mine. She's still at AB InBev. Her name's Ramona. She announced, rather is the right word, J. Cole as the Castlight Unlocks artist a couple of years ago. And the reason why I bring this up is because, now maybe this is something that happens a lot more, but I believe that when she did this, no one else had done something like this. So she basically used Twitter and digital out of home together. And I'm talking about years ago. So basically what she did in a nutshell is that they created this beautiful image of J. Cole, who's a hip hop artist. And they had people tweet around like who they think the artist would be for this year's Unlocks, because Castlight Unlocks by that time was like a culture staple in the country, right? Everyone wanted to know who's the next artist, who are we bringing, and how is it going to look different. So the more people tweeted, the more of this image started revealing. So it was very much consumer driven and lots of consumer participation, but it was like Twitter interfacing with digital out of home to reveal J. Cole's face as the public got involved and like tweeted at the brand. So you had like this viral moment that then revealed something on out of home, and then obviously that stayed to create the awareness and the scale. And I just thought that was, for me in South Africa, probably the beginning of thinking about out of home differently, and how do you move from just putting a picture on a billboard and think that it's going to cut through, to using other mediums like digital and social media and interface with the technology in out of home, and think about out of home differently, to be more integral to your storytelling. So I was really inspired by what she did. It's like I said, it's a long time ago, but for me, it was a brilliant use of digital thinking in a medium that sometimes I think is underestimated.
And it's such a great medium that supports social, supports search, and that, search and social supports out of home if you're doing it. It just has such great synergy with these other mediums, even radio. And I think that is such a great campaign example about how you can get social media to so beautifully interact to reveal what your out of home ad's going to be. Like, that is so powerful, and something I have definitely not seen a lot of. Like, we've seen the post and get your post shared or your live feed or whatever shared onto a board, but almost like driving engagement to activate what your out of home ad is. Like, that is absolutely incredible and really, really powerful. And I've definitely not seen a lot of those types of campaigns. So what incredible campaign examples you've given, and how out of home could be used in such great, effective, and strategically aligned ways, and how it works with other mediums as well. I really, really love the way that we've kicked off this episode.
Provantage, digital innovators at scale. With a national network of over 4,000 screens, we reach more than 50 million people on the move in the most high-value environments across South Africa. Flexible, impactful, contextually relevant. Our real-time audience measurement ensures precise targeting and transparent results. As we build a programmatically enabled digital network, we're shaping a more connected future for brands. Provantage, redefining out of home.
I also love the example of inviting people to be part of the campaign. As Chris mentioned, a lot of the be part of the campaign is, have your selfie shared with your hashtag for a specific thing, or you and your friends. But to actually be involved with revealing the messaging or revealing the campaign idea, I think is really smart. And I also like that you've caveated that this happened a while ago, is that you don't need the latest technology. You don't need to have screens that are built with the latest systems in them in order to activate something like this. I think if you have an idea, it can be very simply executed. Obviously, now programmatic is a reality in the industry from a digital out of home perspective, but there are simple ways to execute a really simple idea very well in out of home. And I think that's what I love about the range of like creative options you can have when it comes to out of home, is that you can be tech heavy, or you can do something, that's a simple decal reveal that happens over a couple of days, or as you mentioned, a countdown clock that can really just grab that attention. These client point of view episodes I absolutely love because, well, there are a number of reasons I love them, right? First of all, the pace that everything's happening at, even having worked at a major agency, when you get your weekly meeting or your bi-weekly meeting with your client to catch up, there's not a lot of time to actually have these type of conversations with what inspires you? Where do you get that inspiration? From an agency perspective, it becomes quite transactional because, the campaign's happening and let's focus on what needs to be done. From a media owner perspective, a lot of the people listening to the podcast are media owners. They very seldom get the exposure to clients themselves. And when they do, again, it's very job to be done focused. And then kind of, you don't have this time to understand what goes on in the background. Even the examples you've unpacked, hearing some of the stories that go on in the background, that's what makes the campaign so memorable, and people resonate with the campaign. And then, anybody who goes back, and we will tag them in the episode, the examples you've referenced, you look at it with a different lens, having met the person behind it and also understanding, oh, what were the teams thinking when they did that? Why did they do that? So I really love having these type of conversations with clients who've actually brought these campaigns to life. We've touched on quite a lot of big, bold ideas from an FMCG perspective, as well as the alcohol category. And I wanted to ask you, looking more away from the big launches and the big announcements and from a day-to-day function, I wanted to ask you, from your experience, what have you seen the benefit and the job that out of home does very well for the FMCG industry around alcohol brands? What do you think out of home does to really kind of shine in that space, and how it can be most effectively used for brands in those categories?
Um, I mean, it depends on the market, right? And it depends on what your objectives are. I mean, I sit in so many rooms where people can't voice to me what it is that they're trying to do. So it's almost like, this is what we're doing, and then we've got 4 levers, and we want to activate and implement all 4 of these levers, and that's just not the case anymore. We don't have endless budgets, and you have to put your money where you're going to get the return, but you can only measure the return if you're clear on what it is you're trying to. So from an effectiveness perspective and out of home, like bringing those two together, if you do out of home, for me, out of home is all about scale, right? So that's the first thing I think about when I think about out of home, is like the scale and the impact that you create with your consumers. So we touched a lot now on like big ideas that drove talkability. And to your point, that's once in a blue moon. You're not going to do that for every campaign. It's super expensive and it takes a lot of time. There's a day-to-day role that out of home plays, and a lot of that for me in my career was about scale. It was about equity and awareness, right? It's a massive awareness and salience driver, especially across the African continent. But if you do it the right way, it is very much a salience / awareness driver. And especially if you do it in conjunction with other media parts, right? With digital and radio and whatever else you wanna use in your campaign. That's one part of out of home. But the other part that people don't realize is that it's a massive driver of trust in developing markets. So if consumers don't see you on their commuter route and like on billboards like this, the trust and the belief in the brand drops significantly. I didn't know this until I did some research across some of the markets in Africa. I had some such interesting focus groups. I spoke to like some young consumers in Kenya about, when's the last time that you saw like something as you were driving to school, and they couldn't answer me. So they just don't see these things. But then you speak to like the moms of the household and all the dads that go to work and the people that actually buy the products, and like they're the ones that go and do grocery shopping, and it's a very different conversation. And that's where it came to light that they felt that if they didn't see these brands on their commuter route, so they didn't see them investing into like expensive marketing, that they couldn't trust the product. There's a lot of consumers that don't have a lot of money. So if they're going to part with their money, they want to part with their money and know what they're getting. And out of home and I didn't know this, so this was a big aha moment for me, is a big trust driver in markets, especially especially developing markets.
And what I just want to add to that is that you started with what is the objective of what you actually want to do. And I think it's an important place to start, because sometimes, the client wants to drive leads. And then you're like, okay, well, is out of home the best channel to be doing that? Yes, if you do it in this way. If the client wants to drive a specific thing, sometimes out of home, it might not deliver on that specific objective, but it plays into the trust piece. So it forms a piece in the media mix. There's a reason that there are a number of different media channels as well. So I think it's a really good point to start, is that what is the actual objective of what you're wanting to achieve, and what media channels can be plugged in to achieve that, and where does out of home play? I think the beauty about out of home, like you've touched on, is that it's got very specific areas it can plug in, but it's also got this overarching trust builder, which is really strong. And I think fascinating to hear your experience from the focus groups you held.
We're in the media world. We speak a lot about data and measurement and needing to rationalize, how a medium is working, and if it's working for the clients, and if it's delivering on that return on investment for them. And I just wanted to, from a client perspective, with your expansive career, I wanted to talk to you about your perspective on measurement for out of home. Now, as South Africa, we are in an evolution of measurement. I always say that on our measurement episodes. We have got measurement, we've got a currency. Unfortunately, at this point, we do not have all our formats and panels measured in the country, but we have moved leaps and bounds to where we are now with a large majority being measured. And we do have the complexities of different types of measurement methodologies, providers, and that's obviously a layered complexity for media planners and for clients that are obviously reviewing the work. And then when we look at rest of Africa, that is different by market, right? A lot of these markets don't have BRICS or joint industry councils. They don't have out-of-home currencies. They also have international providers coming in to offer different types of measurements for out-of-home. But from a client point of view, having been involved in managing, and overseeing teams that obviously were leading on the media piece, on the media side, what is your perspective when it comes to measurement and just, explaining why it is so important for media owners to know why measurement is so important for them to have for their inventory, so that agencies can obviously rationalize why they've selected this inventory to clients?
Yeah, I mean, the reality is that if you can't prove the impact of your marketing investment, it won't happen again. That's just, we all like to dance around that and talk about the fluff, but that's a fact. So if you can't justify the spend and show the results of what you did, it'll be very difficult to get that across the line for the next 6 months. Money gets put where we believe the biggest impact will be, based on, again, what are your objectives and what is it that you're trying to do. So the measurements that I'm familiar with is mostly reach driven, and I've always had a little bit of a challenge with that, right? So yes, I know that 1 million people drive on this highway and they're going to see the billboard, but the reach doesn't necessarily mean there's any conversion or that there's any real impact. And then for me, this is the same on social media, right? I don't care how many people see the advertising on social media. I don't care how many followers someone has. I don't care. Reach for me has always been a little bit of a vanity measure because, yes, I see a lot of stuff on Instagram as well, but it doesn't mean that I'm doing something about it. So that is a challenge across the board. I don't think it's just out of home specific, but what makes it different for out of home is that you can't prove any conversion or impact or change in behavior just because of that piece of out of home. So it's a little bit easier when it's like proximity out of home and you can see how like sales pick up in the outlets surrounding the out of home location. I mean, the fast food industry does this really well, where they put out of home up close to their specific change, and they turn around for the greatest chicken or whatever. So I think that's easier to measure. My advice would be the reach is important still. Like we said in the beginning, this is about scale, impact, and awareness. So when you buy boards or when you decide where your creative's going to go, reach will always be the first question. Like, how big is the footfall? Who comes here? What commuter route is it on? Who's the type of consumer that's going to see this? So maybe there's an opportunity to bring some more color into the reach conversation, like which demographic is going to be what times of day does the commuter route pick up, et cetera, et cetera. So you tell a little bit more of a consumer centric story and not just a numbers story. That might be something. But it would be interesting for me to understand, how can we measure the impact of out of home from a conversion point of view, which I don't think anyone has cracked yet. That being said, I have seen in like brand measures. So like if you measure salience / awareness or meaning difference, whatever your objectives are, if we do a big out of home campaign, and the out of home is supposed to stay up for a while, right? It's a costly medium. I can see brand measures track up and down based on the amount of out of home that we've done. So it's not just the out of home, it's also the messaging and the creative that goes on the boards, and if you can recall what they see, right? So for me, out of home is also a trigger. Like you see something and it's a constant trigger for you to act or do something differently. So you can see the measures of your brand go up and down when out of home has been in the market for 3 months. So there's some brand measures around that and equity measures. But from a media owner perspective, reach is super important, but it can't be the only thing. So who is it? What are they interested in? What is their behavior when they go on this commuter route, or when what does that look like? So bringing a little bit more depth into the data, I think would help clients decide more strategically where is it that they want to go, and why is this maybe a little bit better than option B or C. But I would love to hear from you guys as well.
Just the first top of mind for me is when you're talking about like very much those brand studies, and when it just sparked a thought for me that I don't think there's enough brands or media owners putting it forward, or agencies putting it forward when they are doing these big out of home focused campaigns, or these big campaigns that they are doing like a brand lift study and tying it in, right? And I think a lot of the time it's like, oh, we want to see how effective this out of home campaign was, but it's like, well, then I think everybody at the table, all the players at the table needs to be like, okay, well then we need to keep budget aside so we can do a brand lift study to see if it did perform. If the role, as you said, it's about the objective. If the objective is to build brand equity and brand salience, then make sure that you have the study so that you can see if it has delivered on it, what you've outlined. You were speaking about reach is always the numbers that we're using in media. Yes, it is. We have got different types of measurement in South Africa that can provide reach figures. They do different types of methodologies of gathering this data, but ultimately I think what you're speaking about is how do we get attribution, And how do we know what it's converting to, how out of home is attributing to these conversions? And attribution at the moment, there is different ways. Some media owners have been looking at it in South Africa. A handful have done, attribution case studies, but very much related to a lot of, like you were saying, point proximity. So where it's like, to a dealership and driving audiences into the dealership to do test drives, which is like the objective, or the, increased test drives was the KPI. That's where they're looking at the attribution modeling. But from a global level, a regional and a local level, has it been nailed 100%? No. It's still something that's still being, worked on, I think, definitely from an attribution point. And then from an attention metric. So I know you were saying that, you're just reaching, this is the reach number. And I think for us, I think everybody's talking about it, right? Like you can reach 1 million people, but how much of your attention did you grab? And how much of that, how long of that attention, did you hold? And I think that's the important thing. Like we're all talking about it in media and marketing, this audience with this fragmented mental capacity at the moment, because you're just being fed so much different content. And now it's questioning authenticity of content, right? That's also happening at the moment now with the increase of AI. But I think, this fragmented attention, and I think the attention-based metrics is what's becoming more and more important.
The other piece that I wanted to just build on is that from a measurement perspective, as Chris mentioned, there's the OMC with the Road 2.0 data in our market, which is our JIC. Each country seems to have its own different measurement partner, but they're built on the same methodology. I think the other piece to add to that, depending on the environment, there are other measurement partners that have come to market using different, like mobile data, sensors to understand who is the audience. So it goes beyond just understanding how many people. There were 1 million people, but to your point, Silke, it's to say, who were they? What were those people doing? What were their interests? And I think that's where the data starts to become very interesting. I think in places where it's appropriate and you're able to, from the data being available, to combine those two pieces together, I think would be a match made in out-of-home heaven. I know that a lot of people are probably nodding along with this because there are a lot of conversations happening around how do you take the standard measurement and then combine it with understanding rich insights about that environment and about the people in that environment. So I think that that's definitely a piece that'll get us closer to the attribution. And another piece I wanted to mention was around the brand map data. So brand map survey over 35,000 people online. They work with people who've earned 10,000 Rand a month and upwards, but they ask them such rich questions from a consumer profile that you can start to understand if they notice out of home on a highway or if they notice out of home in a mall, what is the demographic profile of those people according to the survey. It obviously only speaks to kind of the top end of the market. It doesn't cover the full range, but it gives you an idea, again, depending on which brand you're working on or which campaign. How do you understand more about this audience? I think it's great that you've called out reach as like a vanity metric. I love that because it's actually quite true, that in a way it has its important and it's critical from a media metric perspective. But I think we're, as an industry, evolving beyond just the reach metric, and we want to understand this attention piece, the attribution piece. Everybody's speaking about that, but how do we actually get there? Some global guests we've chatted to in markets that are maybe more advanced in certain aspects in South Africa, they don't even have the answer to that question yet. So I think whoever does crack it will be fantastic for the industry to learn from it. But yeah, I think you've highlighted some great points.
I just want to build that because I think it's something Silke mentioned, that you can have this amazing out of home, but if your creative's not great, it's not going to do the job for you. It's not going to deliver on the objectives. So I want to highlight, yes, we're looking at reach. We want to look at attention-based metrics. We want to look at, brand lift studies. But ultimately, one of the Kantar stats is that, 50% of that campaign's effectiveness is based on creative.
100%.
And I think it's really important to, those that are listening to this episode, we have got creative episodes with Chief Creative Officer Roanna. We've had Dean Olschick from Halo. We've had some really amazing Chief Creative Officers on the podcast. Go back and listen to those episodes with the rules and the tips and the advice that they give. Because, we can talk about having the best out-of-home plan, most strategic positionings, right? Like if your creative isn't going to hit the nail on the head and deliver whatever that objective is, then, you've gone and invested all this money, but it's not going to deliver on its effectiveness, even if you did, pay for a brand list study.
That is probably for me the biggest thing that needs to come out of the conversation here, right? Like it's easy to say out of home is too expensive or it doesn't work, when most of the time it's because the creative is bad. So, that is it. And it's a tough thing to hear, but it's the truth. And I had a media strategist on my account when I was this is like very young in my career. I was still working on Colin Kaap. So this is like 2013, 2014. His name was Vikas Swanepoel. He's one of the smartest people I've ever met, right? And Vikas,
He's amazing.
I'll never forget.
Yeah.
Vikas came to me one day and he was like, look, I know that you want to do all of this out of home stuff, but it's not going to work because the creative is bad. And I'm like, excuse me? Like,
Go Vikas.
I was a little bit taken, and we're very good friends, and I love him dearly. I think that as media owners and as like media agencies, you also have a responsibility to educate the client, because sometimes we don't understand, right? We don't know the medium as well as you guys do, and we don't know what's out there. We just know what we know. So we're like, oh, we've got a marketing plan and we've got all of these levers we want to tick, and here's what, like, let's just do this on out of home, when the wealth of knowledge sits on the other side.
Yeah.
You know, and if I didn't have him push me and say, you know, it's not going to work, no one's going to remember this, and give me some data and like teach me when I was a young marketer, I would probably not have been you know, as brave as I was later in my career with the examples I mentioned earlier. So that goes two ways. The marketer needs to be open to take the feedback and listen, which, you know, I love being pushed. So I love if people push back and tell me this is not good enough, let's try harder. But, you know, he had a massive impact on my thinking and how I approached out of home from there on out.
I think it's a great full circle for us to end the episode here. What I'm loving is the conversation around, again, kind of being brave and having the guts on both sides of the fence to receive information, and on the media agency side or the media owner side to be able to say, I don't think the creative is going to work in out of home because from my experience, this is what we've seen. And I think it kind of also pushes each other to know, like, you need to create specific messaging for out of home that is different to what you would be putting on something else. And I think that it also speaks to building true partnerships. The example that you've given with Vikas, which I think is amazing. I think a lot of people listening to this will know Vikas. I love the conversation we've had today. We've touched on big creative. We've touched on so many practical aspects of out of home. The measurement pieces are also really interesting to get your perspective on. And I just wanted to say thank you so much for joining us and for sharing your experience with us. I think the brands you've worked on speak for themselves, as well as your knowledge in the industry. So I've thoroughly enjoyed today's episode. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for the time. I love talking about some fun, creative out of home ideas. So I appreciate the time and the invite.
Thanks for joining us today to go beyond the billboard. Subscribe to our podcast to ensure you don't miss out on our exciting content.
Join us again to go beyond the billboard.
1, 2,